Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. All right. Welcome back to Day 3 of Quest for Excellence 21. I know for me it's been a great conference, and I hope all of you will agree, and certainly from those of you who I've spoken to personally, it's been 2 days already full of lots of learning and sharing, and I want to thank all of you and all of our speakers for their participation in helping that learning occur. So, round of applause for everybody this morning. This morning's sessions will be available free of charge in the coming days from our website, so check our website for details. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you this morning's keynote speaker, Simon Kuper, who is the President and Chief Operating Officer of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company. And true to the person that he is, or that I've gotten to know very recently, his first comment to me was, keep the introduction brief and give credit to the people I work with. So you have a sense of our morning speaker from just that comment. But still, I'll give you a brief introduction to Simon Kuper. He oversees the operations, development, and strategic positioning of the world's most powerful brands and luxury groups, one of the world's most powerful brands and luxury groups. He joined the Ritz-Carlton Company in February 2001 after a distinguished career with Marriott International, where he served 3 years as president of Marriott Lodging Canada. He was born in England, but is a citizen of Canada, and his first hospitality job was with Canadian Pacific Hotels and Resorts. Among his many professional honors, Simon has served on the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars and the Canada Institute Advisory Board. Since becoming president and COO of Ritz-Carlton, he has presided over a major expansion of the brand, which now numbers 72 hotels around the world, and as he shared with me this morning, that number continues to grow. Maybe most impressive, and then I'll stop talking about Simon, is that he was recently named the 2008 Corporate Hotelier of the World by Hotels Magazine. Quite a distinction. I'd also like to, on a more personal note, on behalf of the Baldrige program, thank Simon and Sue Stevenson of the Ritz-Carlton's, for the Ritz-Carlton's coordination of our community service event that some of you participated in this Sunday, the Community Footprints event that was held at the Washington, D.C. Boys Town. It was a wonderful event, a great opportunity to give back to the community, and I thought we would start right before Simon comes up with sharing a few photos from that event this past Sunday. As you can see, we helped beautify the landscape around Boys Town. There is, I believe, David Spong, the former president of the Baldrige Foundation, digging in the earth there. And I think that's Simon planting. And we had help from people of all ages. Great. Okay, thank you again to the Ritz-Carlton and to everyone else who participated in that event. Now, without any further introductions, let me please introduce to you our keynote speaker, Simon Kuper. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I trade all those awards for 10 points of occupancy right now. This is the only way if I go, oh gosh, those lights are bright. Actually, the best award of the year was at Boys Town. I got an honorary resident award, so I now have another place to stay in Washington, which is terrific. I was thinking about sort of ducking the reality of what we're in and giving you a nice keynote speech on the pursuit of excellence at Ritz-Carlton. But I decided that it would be much more useful for you. By the way, any chance I can get those down a little bit, those spots, or thank you very much, so I can at least see people. Great. I thought about ducking, but I decided that given the environment we're all in, and I don't think there's anybody globally from my travels that has managed to avoid the realities of the economic crisis and you know, how that unfolds in a company or in a division or in a group of people or a team, I think is really important. So I've decided to sort of give you news from the front and talk a little bit about sort of inside a two-time Malcolm Baldrige winner, you know, during an economic crisis and what I think are some of the critical things. It does tie back to two of the things that Barbara did want me to talk about. The ones I won't cover, sort of the growth of Ritz-Carlton around the world, because I don't think that's as pertinent. And the second one was an interesting subject I always like, which is, you know, how do you follow a legendary leader in a company? But I will talk about how a luxury organization like ours is addressing the global economic situation, and also a tie into our, you know, what we do with our communities and our community footprints program, some of which you participated in at Boys Town. So I'm going to hit three topics, and this is my start off. I do a joke now, beginning of each presentation. I didn't used to, but in this current environment, I think we need a little bit of humor. So level with me, Colonel, what kind of worst case scenario we're talking about here, in case you can't read it from the back. Three topics, and they relate to the criteria for performance excellence. I'm going to cover basically leadership and customer focus and the workforce. I got to sort of pick those three topics because we only have a short while, and I thought those are the three that probably are the three constituencies that are the most concerning to a leader in a challenging economic time. His or her own personal leadership of the organization, how it impacts the customer, how it impacts the ladies and gentlemen, in our case, the employees. I think also I will touch on how it impacts communities because in many cases a Ritz-Carlton hotel is often by far is the largest employer in its community, so communities are also very important. So those three areas, leadership, customer, and the workforce. And let me start with what I consider to be the role of a leader in a crisis. And I've put three things down there: evaluate, communicate, and act. And I think that the one that is most important is evaluate. Whether you're leading a company, whether you're leading a group, whether you're leading a team, one needs to evaluate the significance of the environment that one's in and how that's going to impact your team or your group or your company. And this is it's almost unprecedented, I think, what we've gone through in the last certainly 8 to 9 months. And a lot of very smart people have made some very, very poor decisions. They've evaluated and made some terrible decisions. There's a number of large American airlines out there that have hedged fuel out to the end of the year at $100 a barrel. And a very expensive, very poor decision. You can argue whether the decision by the government to let Lehman go down was the right decision. You look at Warren Buffett and some of his investment decisions. This has been almost an unprecedented environment we're in, and how does a leader evaluate effectively how that environment is going to impact his or her organization, and what do they need to do about it. So I think the evaluation process has been really important this time around, because this crisis has not resembled anything we've seen before. And if you take the typical approach to a crisis, that you try to evaluate it in advance, take actions one time, and then let the organization rebuild. This has been almost a weekly, monthly, daily situation as it rolls out, frankly, across the world. Second is communicate. And I think that we all agree that in an environment like this, one cannot communicate enough. All of our ladies and gentlemen read headlines as I do. They're all aware of what's happening in the environment, in the economy, in their part of the world. And it's a question of how does it impact them, and what are we doing about it. I just came back from doing 14 hotels in 5 days, basically 3 to 4 hours every single hotel, and everywhere the same message, because one has to be out in front in times like this. You can't duck it. Our ladies and gentlemen want to see leadership. They want to see what leadership is doing about it. They want to also understand the bigger picture, because everything that they see rolls out in their small environment. What is the bigger global picture, and what are we doing about it? So, moving along, one of the things that when asked the question, how bad will this economic crisis be? How long is it going to last? And what is the recovery going to look like? Those are 3 absolutely critical questions that I and my team try to evaluate. We look at things like, where do we think the economy is going to go? I don't want to spend any time on this. Nevertheless, our projections are that right the way through 2009, certainly in North America, there is going to be negative GDP. That's very impactful, obviously, upon expenditures, very impactful upon businesses, very impactful upon the consumer. So it's a long term. The main thing to take away from here is that we've decided it is long term. The second thing we look at is, what is the recovery going to look like? And this is really quite critical to a lot of the decisions that we make. And if you look at the top right-hand corner, that's called a sort of a V recovery. Everything recovers relatively quickly. I use this when I'm talking to our leaders in our hotels, because we went through 9/11, and as did everybody else. And 9/11 in the travel industry was a relatively short-term loss of business. It wasn't an economic issue. It was confidence in travel. And so Ritz-Carlton, like probably a lot of our other companies, certainly in the travel, we did things that made sure that our ladies and gentlemen stayed employed with us. So we would encourage 4-day weeks. We would encourage furloughs. We would encourage leave of absence. We did all sorts of things, but the last thing we didn't want to do was to terminate anybody or have any kind of layoffs, because we knew that this wasn't going to be that long. Business would return, and we needed our teams back in full force. On the other hand, the bottom left-hand corner is probably closer to where we think the recovery is going to be for our luxury segment of travel. It could be the top left, which is a sort of a slower recovery, but either way, our evaluation, coming back to this, the role that leaders play in evaluating, our evaluation is that it is going to be a longer, drawn-out recovery. That has very significant implications on our decision-making. And one of the toughest things in visiting our hotels, and the region I was in was primarily Florida and the Southeast, which is a key region for us. I had to frankly say to everybody or the leaders I addressed there, that we had 300 less leaders in that region than we had 12 months prior. And that's because we have decided that we needed to right-size the organization for a long, drawn-out recovery. And that's a very tough thing for us. You had 300 leaders who'd made a commitment to Ritz-Carlton. 300 leaders at Ritz-Carlton had made a commitment to them, to their careers, to their future, and we embarked on a journey together. And then, because of the economic crisis, because of our evaluation that this was going to be long-term, we now had 300 less in that region. So there's a very high price to pay, but that is, I think, one of the critical decisions that leadership has to take in terms of evaluating where the business is going, how long this is going to last, and what does that recovery look like. Just an aside and touching a little bit on Ritz-Carlton's development, you won't be able to read this, and I apologize, but this looks at the rest of the world, and there aren't many countries that are doing, oh, sorry, can I go back? Somebody jumped, I must have, thank you. The only thing I would say here is the bottom left is China and India, and China still just published, I think, 6% growth for Q1, is looking probably at growth this year around 6 to 7%, and will continue to have positive GDP. Not what they anticipated, but nevertheless positive. The reason I put that up there is in past times, before all of this, when we were able to develop long-range plans for Ritz-Carlton, one of the key things probably 6 or 7 years ago was positioning the brand in China. And this is a great growth market for us. We now have 7 Ritz-Carltons open in China. We'll have 9 by the end of next year, all outstanding, brand new hotels in great locations. So while it's obviously we have very challenged economy, challenged environments in North America and Europe, fortunate as a brand that part of that long-term strategy was to clearly focus on markets like China and position ourselves well. Now, the other one, you never know when you're going to get something coming in completely unplanned. And this is the what we call the Aig Effect. And if you can't read it at the back, Aig gets more federal money, and the gentleman at the desk says, "Hello, Ritz-Carlton reservations." We can't duck the fact that we are a very prominent luxury brand. And this particular ad, and of course the whole aspect of financial service companies that have received top funds, having meetings at hotels, became very much front and center, both in Congress and also for the media. And it created an enormous hype and a very, very significant cancellation of business in many of our hotels. Very hard to fight back against. We've been working hard since the end of last year to try and turn this around a little bit. But the bottom line is that the focus that Congress put on it, the focus that the media put on it, basically not only financial services companies, but any other companies felt that it was inappropriate to go out and have meetings at luxury hotels. We have been pushing a program called Meetings Means Business, trying to reverse that and trying to point out that this is how America does business. People getting together in sessions like this, and what happened is the actions of a few really have tarnished the whole aspect of getting together and having meetings in luxury hotels. We did have some success, and we've got some great partners out there who have gone online, who have gone on the media, have gone on television and said, clearly, this is how we do business. How else do you get together? How else do you recognize your top performers? How else do you motivate them? How else do you communicate and share? And so this has been it's going to be a long haul, but it was something that came out of nowhere. It impacted, and I'll touch here on the communities for a second, because luxury hotels, by definition, many of them are located in relatively isolated locations, in small communities. So whether it's Reynolds Plantation in Greene County, Georgia, Half Moon Bay in Half Moon Bay, California, Amelia on Amelia Island, north of Jacksonville, Naples, many of these locations, the Ritz-Carlton is the largest employer, the largest taxpayer. And the alternative employment for our ladies and gentlemen in these locations is none. So it certainly damaged the most vulnerable of our ladies and gentlemen in many of these locations, and then also significant impact upon the communities. Pushing along to customers for us, and I'll just, again, luxury somehow in the sort of last year has turned from being celebrated, and this is actually when we announced the Ritz-Carlton in Charlotte, feeling crass because your city's not thought world-class, don't throw fits, they're putting up a Ritz. That used to be the way that a luxury hotel was welcomed. Now, this is what appears. And the challenging thing is we have an absolutely wonderful brand, but it is still kind of the brand that is identified with luxury, and anybody wants to make a cartoon, we end up on the front of the cartoon. So, but on a more serious note, I will flip through this one and go straight to this. On a more serious note, our challenge from a customer point of view is how do we deliver rational luxury, as we call it, in an age of discerning consumption? Again, from a leadership point of view, we have evaluated that this is going to be a long-term situation, that we are in a new era from a consumer point of view. This isn't something, again, the consumer isn't just going to rebound. So coming back to that key point that I tried to make earlier in terms of evaluating how this economic crisis is going to impact the consumer long term. There's no doubt that consumers will spend less on luxury goods and services. Travel and leisure, dining out and entertainment are all relatively typical. This is very similar to a lot of surveys that are out there right now. One of the more interesting facts, and I've red circled there, across the top are three types of luxury customers. True luxury, which would be traditional, old money, what would be probably in my organization the traditional Ritz-Carlton customer. The contemporary core, which is more new money, they've accumulated wealth over the last 15 to 10 years. And then the third is stretch, and these are luxury consumers who are really stretching to buy that handbag or stretching to have that experience at a Ritz-Carlton. The most concerning is the red circle, which is this true luxury consumer who has money, is saying that they will spend less money on frivolous things. So really important. Even the consumer with money today and in the future is not just going to jump back into spending as they used to. Another one that's really pretty interesting, the third one down here is, I purchase more of what I need and not what I want. I would argue that many of our consumers a year ago could purchase what they wanted. And I think you're going to see more and more this idea of I'm going to purchase what I need. Much more discerning consumption. We see values changing. This is a bit busy, but if you pull it off afterwards or get it from Barbara, it's a little bit busy, and what it tries to show is how consumer values have shifted literally in the last 6 months. And they've shifted towards the top, one-of-a-kind experiences. I will still pay for an experience that I can't get anywhere else. They've shifted to bottom left, this idea of authenticity and utility, and you'll see this in another slide. People are buying things that are authentic. It's about craftsmanship. It's not about the logo on the bag as it was last year. It's about how is it made, how is it stitched, how long is it going to last. And then it's also shifted a little bit to the right there, access to knowledge or wisdom. And these are these 5 areas of one-of-a-kind experiences, knowledge and wisdom, convenience and respect for time, authenticity and utility, and wow factor have been 5 keys in terms of defining what we think define value for our customers. And so what we tried to do there was look at how have those changed. The wow factor is definitely less important. The wow factor is definitely now subordinated to the one-of-a-kind experiences, knowledge or wisdom, authenticity and utility. One of the stories actually I won't do the story because I noticed what time it is. If I get there. This is another one that that is much of the same, but it tells a slightly different story. And it talks about the fact that the gut, the decision-making process by our customers from head, heart, and gut, and that a lot of the decisions were made by the gut in the last 3 to 4 years. They're about desire, they're about fantasy, they're about allure, they're about the brand, whether it be the Ritz-Carlton or the Prada, less about its usefulness, less about how long it's going to last, less about the service. And this just talks about how the head and the heart, and think in your own minds, in your own purchasing, how it's changed over the last year, how the head and the heart are going to be much more influential in terms of the decision-making for luxury consumers as we move forward. A strong believer in that, and to me, the critical thing from a Ritz-Carlton point of view is the head makes the rational decision. So from a marketing point of view, from a positioning, whatever we do out there, our key is to market to the head to get that decision to go to the Ritz-Carlton, and then once they're at the Ritz-Carlton, how do we win over the heart? Because ultimately what we're looking for is a fully engaged guest, and that comes from the heart. This just reiterates or reinforces what I was talking about earlier about authenticity, how the top 3 things, and this is today, consumers are looking for, luxury consumers: superior quality, superior craftsmanship, superior customer service. The difficulty here is, and as we use it with our ladies and gentlemen, is this is what our consumers are looking for in a time when we're cutting back, in a time when we have fewer leaders, in a time when we have less occupancy, in a time when we're trying to manage our business as practically as we possibly can. So consumers' expectations haven't changed, they've only increased. I'm going to have to be, these are some of the things we're looking at in the new term. The only one I'll go to is the 4th one here, and that is around, we need to help make guests feel socially responsible. We've been seeing this confluence of the values of Ritz-Carlton in terms of our social responsibility to our communities and the changing values of the luxury customer, looking at how can they be more involved in the communities they stay in, how can they be more socially responsible in their practices, how can they be more environmentally responsible when they're staying at a luxury hotel. You saw some of the photographs, but this is our Community Footprints program, and we gave nearly $8.5 million in cash and kind donations. We had 57,000 volunteer hours last year, and that's probably only just touching the surface of what our hotels in their communities. I just focus on the bottom right here. I don't want to spend a lot of time, but this is guest involvement. Things like give-back getaways, meaningful meetings, volunteering. The reason I focus here is this is really, really, to me, the high point of what we do. When you can get a luxury guest staying in a suite, spending a lot of money, out for an afternoon, possibly with their kids or with their spouses or their friends, with employees of the hotel. When you get guests and employees together, working on a project, in a community, in an environmental project, a community project, an education project, it's just amazing what you get out of that. That is almost the sort of the ultimate experience that we drive for. That guest is going to be engaged for life. That lady or gentleman is engaged with Ritz-Carlton for life. And so it's really sort of what began as how do we nurture our communities, how do we give back to our communities, really was perfect timing for how luxury consumers were looking at how can I have a more meaningful vacation? How can I take the children in while we're down in Cancun, do something that has some meaning, introduce them to an environmental program or some other form of educational program. So I think it's just a terrific, Sue Stevenson, who I'm sure you've all met, headed up. The only blatant advertisement I have is this one. Give Back Getaways was the most significant story of 2008. The Ritz-Carlton embraced voluntourism before it was chic. And to be fair and practical, one of the things I will always remind everybody is that my predecessor and his team back in 1983 had the environment and communities in the original strategy for Ritz-Carlton, in the original vision statement for Ritz-Carlton. To see how other I won't go into the other hotel brands. I'm going to be very quick on the workforce, and that's not fair because that is a very You know, how do you keep a culture of excellence like Ritz-Carlton has had? How do you keep it thriving in such challenging times? I'll give a quote here from Lou Gerson, this idea that culture, it is the game. For a company like ours to expect our 36,000 ladies and gentlemen around the world every single day at every touch point to add value to the company by adding value to that guest experience, we have to have a very strong culture. I will flip across this point and go to this one. I didn't present this chart particularly well, but the yellow is the occupancy in our first quarter last year on the left, and the yellow on the right is our full engagement, our guest full engagement last year. And then you see the blues are this year. So on the left is occupancy, which I don't need to tell you is dramatically lower than it was, so we have far fewer occupied rooms. On the other hand, the full engagement of our guests has risen. This is obviously something we measure and watch very closely because, like any other company, we are taking steps to try and mitigate the losses in occupancy by reducing cost and being more efficient. So critical is to watch is how is that playing out on our guest. And there is an old adage that a full hotel operates the most effectively. So kudos here 100% to our ladies and gentlemen who, despite the very difficult environment, have managed to continue to raise the full engagement of our customers. And that is 100% because of the rich culture that has been 25 years in Ritz-Carlton. And hopefully we can continue to sustain this, even though our evaluation that this is going to be a long, hard, drawn-out fight. I'm going to leave you with the two quotes. First one, again, is by Gerson, who I think is an absolutely terrific leader. And I think this quote is lengthy, but I think for the times we're in, I happen to love it. If you're not there, if you're not working shoulder to shoulder with your people, if you're not carrying the burden of everyday execution, if you can't be inspirational, if you can't show your real self, if you're just going to be intellectual, if you're not just going to send out memos, that is not going to work. Leaders are involved. Leaders are part of what they're leading. You've got to care. I think in this environment, whether you're running a small team, a big company, I think it's just a terrific reminder of what we leaders, especially in challenging economic environments, need to focus on. The last one I've used a few times, and I kind of like it. I use it mostly when I've got a terrific team that is top in everything they do, and you want to try and say, how do you continue to do better? On the other hand, it's also a really good quote at times like this. And this is Hillary. It's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. And I think the context I would use it in here is that we are all facing the same mountain. I don't care whether we're in a hospital, we're a school, we're Cargill, we are all facing more or less the same mountain. Economic distress, huge impact on our communities, significant impact on our companies, likelihood of a long, drawn-out recovery. So we're all facing the same mountain. The key for all of us is what we do about it. How do we, in our company, in our team, in our businesses, it's what we do about it. Because the mountain is exactly the same for everybody. And what we do about it is what is going to define our individual success, our company's success. So thank you very much indeed. I come right to the end. I hope I'm relatively on time. My only reminders are, from my point of view as we go through this, evaluate, communicate, and act. I think evaluation is really critical from a leadership point of view for anybody in this room, anybody running a team, being part of a team, part of a company. Make that evaluation. Communicate effectively and consistently and constantly to your teams. And obviously, we have to act. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.